What's going on, everyone? Today we've got the new Axial SCX10-III Base Camp here on the bench. This is Axial's newest release on the 10.3 platform, but it's got a number of changes underneath. Starting off with the name of this, the Base Camp. Now, I think that's a pretty good name for this truck, meaning that it's the starting point, the base level, the basic version, whatever you want to call it. That's pretty much what this thing is. We're going to cover all of what's new, most of what carries over, and then some pros, cons, as well as running footage. So we're going to try and power through all of that today, show you guys exactly what to expect in this new SCX10-III Base Camp. Now, this is an actual portal axle version of the 10.3. It doesn't use the straight axles that came on the early Bronco, but it's still a more basic version of the truck beyond that point. It is the lowest price option of the 10.3 line, and it's pretty stripped down in a lot of other ways. So let's get into that. Let's start with what is new. And the most notable thing, of course, will be the body, the Base Camp body. It's being offered in 3 different colors. I've got the green one here. It comes in a blue, which is shown on the other corner of the box. And then there's also a gray, which you can see here. This is pretty much the definition of a generic truck body to me. And the color is fairly generic as well in all of the offerings. Beyond that, the windows are just stickers, non-clear windows. Kind of a bummer in today's market. That's not something I really love to see. But even though it's not a licensed body, it does come with licensed bumpers. These are DeMello off-road bumpers, both front and rear, as you can see here. The rear bumper carries all the way up to that inner fender. It blends nicely in there. The front as well matches that inner fender line pretty well, but we'll get to that here before too long. With this version, you can see that there was a return of the top-mounted body posts rather than the hidden versions that we saw on like the 10.3 Wrangler. So they went with that, very simplistic. And being that this is made to be the entry level, either for custom projects or beginners, it's fine. You can mount any body on here or come up with your own body mounting system, how you're going to on a custom project. Lots of options. Body post though, pretty much as simple as it gets. So throwing that on here doesn't bother me any. Removing the body is of course just the 4 body clips, and we can lift that off. Now underneath of the body, the biggest change here is this new LCXU transmission. This is a all new transmission. It's a new design. Although it looks similar to the previous Axial transmissions, it doesn't share any parts as far as I can tell. This is a 5-gear transmission. We'll get in depth on this new transmission shortly. We'll open it up. I'll show you inside and the specific details about it at that time. But with that new transmission, we also have a new skid plate. You can tell it's got 4 screws there. Previous SCX10-II just had 2 screws there, of course, because it was a more forward mounted design. So there was a lot more as far as mounting went towards the front. And speaking of up front, since there's no electric motor sitting way up there any longer, we've got a new chassis brace up there that's got the steering servo mounted as well as 2 more positions. And these would work for servo winches. Now, that gives you 2 options as far as where you want to mount them. That can depend on the design of the servo winch as far as if you'd want to mount it in the center or offset, up to you. But also, that's not your only option for servo winching. There's another one here on this front bumper cross brace. So they added another winch mount location there. No matter what servo winch you have, there's likely a pretty good position for you to mount it so that you can feed the line through the Fairlead mounted or molded into that DeMello off-road front bumper. One of the biggest weak points in the 10.3 was the panhard mount. Out of the box, it was just a fairly brittle, weak plastic design, and now that's been upgraded to a cast piece. I assume that it's cast aluminum. It's got kind of a shiny finish on it, but it's metal at the very least, as noted on the box, and it still has a spacer to space the panhard off of that mount a little bit, but I assume that that may be the case so that you can use straight axle version without having to change the metal panhard mount itself. It's definitely nice to have that metal piece right out of the box. Should give you the opportunity to be a little bit more rough on this truck without fear of that most common break. On the underside, you'll note that we do have stainless link still. However, these are a little bit of a different stainless link than we've seen on the 10.3 before. Previously, we had the fatter stainless links, and they had a cross hole drilled through them, and they were like a turnbuckle style. I was never a very big fan of the cross holes and all of that, but this style is actually just a 4mm link with threaded ends, so a little bit less expensive of an option. It does leave kind of a hard lip at the rod ends, so it doesn't have as nice of a smooth transition, but it stainless still, doesn't have the cross hole, but it's a little bit slimmer of a link design. And speaking of suspension, we have new shocks again. These are a mainly aluminum shock. It's got a partially metal cap, the metal body, plastic lower cartridge. These remind me a lot of the old Viterra shocks specifically. If they were green like the body, then I'd say they were a dead ringer for it, but that's what they remind me of most specifically. I think that the springs are the same that we saw on the 10-III before, so no difference in size to them. I think it's just a different construction method. Let's jump in and talk about the electronics that are included in this truck. Now, the servo in here is an S614. Now, I believe that the previous RTRs came with an S614S, which is a little bit better built servo compared to this one. This one's a little bit less expensive if you're comparing aftermarket prices, but it's similar in power. I just believe that the gears are not quite built the same. Beyond that, we do have a separate ESC and receiver. We've got a Spectrum 40 amp ESC, so a small but reasonable ESC for this vehicle. But we've got the separate SR315 receiver. A number of the Axial RTRs have been going to the 2-in-1 system, which, the ESC and receiver were combined. This is actually separate. So still, if you're a builder or custom and you have a nicer Spectrum radio, you're still going to be able to use this even if you want to upgrade the ESC. Standard 35 turn motor included, just like we're used to seeing though. The Spectrum ESC is not a smart capable ESC. So if you've got batteries with smart tech, anything like that, this ESC not capable of it. So if you thought you were going to be able to have that feature, not exactly the case. But the radio is the Spectrum SLT3, which does not have the smart technology either. So it makes sense that neither of the two items do. I don't think that I've had any experience with this radio previously. It's comfortable. It feels decent enough. For a RTR radio, it's still pretty nice quality. Very basic. It's got some, trim adjustments there on the front. It is a 3-channel still. It's got the rocker switch here. So 3-channel accessories are still going to be usable. On the backside though, it does have a few physical switches here, and one of them is a throttle limiter. So you can give it 100% throttle, 75 or 50. So if you're buying this for a child that you don't want to have all of the capabilities to burn up their electronics so quickly, you could easily limit that down to 50% throttle, slow this truck way down, and have a little bit more comfort in letting them go nuts. Now, before we get back to going a little bit more in depth on that new transmission, let's quickly just cover again what this truck means as far as being the base camp or bare bones basic version. Starting, of course, with the body. The body, one-piece body, screen printed one color with stickered windows. I have seen people go through and do the removal of the paint underneath of these, pull the stickers off and then remove the paint. It's some work. I've seen it done though. Probably not something that you'll find me doing, but if you're really concerned and you like the style of this body, it can be done. Also, you may have noticed the lack of additional sliders. We've got these slider bases, but there is no external rock slider on this truck. Also, the Black Rhino wheels, those are just a glue-on wheel, not a bead lock. So if you really like these Falcon tires, getting them off is a little bit trickier than just dismounting a set of bead locks, which is kind of a bummer because the tires do look good. The new LCXU transmission, likely a more affordable option compared to the much larger, dig and 2-speed capable front-mounted motor option that came in the other Axial SCX3s. And there is also then getting rid of like that front motor cover, as well as the inner fenders, front and rear. And the SLT3 radio, also a little bit more basic as far as features go as well. But now let's get into the details about the new LCXU transmission. They're calling this a 5-gear reversible transmission. Now it is a single-speed, non-dig transmission, but inside there are 5 gears. And then the reversible part we'll get into as well. I opened this case up There's plenty of grease in case you were wondering. It was well greased out of the box, no issues there. But then inside I went through and just kind of calculated what they've got included in there to see the ratio and see what they're talking about with this reversible function. Now, the reversible part that they're advertising, that's specifically for if you change this truck from portal axles to straight axles. Since a truck like this uses 2 gears in the portal box, it reverses the rotation of the drivetrain. Just like any 2-gear mechanism, input goes one way, the output goes the opposite. So when you remove portals like that and go to straight axles, all of a sudden your truck wants to move the opposite way. Now, the easy way to do that is either swap motor leads or, hit the reverse button on your radio. But because of how motors work and timing, things like that, it's not necessarily the best way to go. So what they've done with this new transmission is they've come up with a stepped gear in there that has 2 possible pockets that it can sit in. And in this case, in the stock configuration, all 5 gears are in contact, giving you the output to this transmission. But if you want to reverse it, you take the second gear in the assembly and you basically flip it over and then put it into a second position. Inside of that molded case, there's a position A and a position B. When you flip it around and then put it into the second position, it actually bypasses completely one of the gears in that gear train. And that is where you get the reversing design of this transmission. Now, the gear that it takes out of the equation is a 22-tooth gear. And the gear that it meshed with previously was also a 22-tooth. So there is no ratio change. The 1-to-1 that it had to reverse the rotation is just canceled out, and there's no change in overall ratio. I did check the calculations for the overall ratio of this. It does have a 4-to-1 spur and pinion with a 56-tooth spur and a 14-tooth pinion. And then internally, the ratio on this is 2.662-to-1. So overall ratio of this transmission in either configuration, 10.65-to-1. Now, if you go through the effort to reverse it because you're going to change axles, you're still going to have to re-gear because, like I said, it didn't modify the ratio at all. It just reversed the rotation. Another benefit of the new LCXG transmission is that it does have a lower center of gravity than the previous style because that motor used to sit way up high here in the front, up by the servo. This is considerably lower than that. It's nice to have weight forward with a motor like that, but it's most important to have it low. And this does a better job than that one did. Although it's still not as low as the old SCX 3-gear transmission. So it would have been nice if they could have just fit that transmission in and had a lower center of gravity yet and a ton of aftermarket support, but that wasn't the plan, I guess. So before we hit the rocks, let's go over some of the pros and cons of this package first. Now, this should have a significantly lower center of gravity than previous SCX10-3s. The body, while it is very basic, it is very basic. There's not a lot of added on items, so it should help keep the center of gravity lower, and that should be compounded by the new LCXU transmission, keeping the motor lower and just in general weighing less than that previous transmission. Now, the new tires I think look great. I think that Axial's had a lot of really good looking tires lately, but I really like this Falcon. The metal panhard mount is a nice change to see. It's a durability issue that was definitely something we had seen in the past, and nice to see that addressed. Having the ESC and receiver separate is nice. The metal servo horn that's included on the 614 servo, we still get the portal axles. Even though this was obviously a cost-conscious kit, they left those in there because they know people like them. Now, I also took off the diff covers on these axles to double check, and they still are using the machined gear sets and the separate locker. All of the new winch mounting options are pretty cool. 3 different places you could possibly mount your winch. If you can't figure out a place to put a servo winch in here, I think you've got the wrong servo winch. They definitely got that knocked out. The bumpers, as far as licensed bumpers, these look pretty good. They're large front and rear, but it's tucked in fairly well. But that's actually an issue that we'll get to here next. Now, first of all, the bumper here. Out of the box, you're actually going to have to move this because it actually just rubs terribly bad. So you're going to have to move that way out to clear everything or trim the bumper. I assume that these are going to come this way in the first batch. So if you get one right away, be prepared to pull a couple of screws and move that bumper out, or be ready to do a little bit of trimming, because I think that it was checked in CAD at full turn and at full straight, but not in the middle. A little bit of an oversight. The rear, no such issue. Everything clears just fine. I don't know about the tire compound yet. They feel pretty decent, but we'll see on the rocks. It does kind of suck that they're on glue-on wheels. Probably gonna have to bake those off because I'll probably continue to use them. 4mm stainless links should get the job done. They're not quite as nice as some of the previous links, but should still do just fine. The lack of inner fenders, you know, you can see right through this truck. It's nice in these days to have inner fenders, but again, cost was the biggest focus on this truck, it appears. The body is pretty boring. You know, the proportions are, you know, it's got a really long bed and this front window looks too short, but it's a truck. It's a truck, you know. Overall, the biggest selling point of this truck is going to be just the straight up dollar number. It's the cheapest Axial SCX3 that has ever existed by a wide margin. So for that reason alone, it's going to be an attractive option for a number of people. I'm fully expecting this to be the far and above best performing SCX10-III. And with that being said, I'm gonna go get this thing. Hope you guys enjoy the running footage. If you enjoyed the video up to this point, hit the like button, subscribe if you're not already, and hit the notification bell so you see the videos as more content on the base camp comes out soon as it gets uploaded. With that, enjoy the running footage. So we're out here on the rocks. Set myself up a little 10-gate course. We're gonna see how this new truck does. Driving one-handed and filming with the other, of course, but I still assume that this one will perform decently well. I've pushed the front bumper out, which we can already see. I have to take another approach at that gate. I haven't tested any of these gates or anything like that, of course, but we already tapped that gate, so we're just gonna push through it. The side hill's pretty well though. Kind of surprised with that. Be nice if that bumper wasn't so far out. Now I had to push that bumper out just because of the tire rubbage. Made it through though. Oof. I expected the tires to climb up that better. Shouldn't have hit that gate. That was my fault. Stock steering servo actually doesn't feel so bad. Drag brake's a little heavy, wants to tip itself over on downhills, but it still stops it well enough. I'm running a 4300 milliamp Gens Ace Adventure Pack on the side here. So weight's still nice and low and a little bit more forward than the rearward battery mounting option. All right, set up second course. See how this goes. A little more side hill on this one. All right, now we're gonna wedge this thing down in this thing, see if we can get it to turn in this tight. Go. See if we can get it to get through there now. There it goes. Truck actually stays pretty well planted for what it... See if we can make this uphill turn and climb. Actually, yeah, not too bad, fairly impressive. Bad driving, my fault. Distracted. Left tire up on that. Pretty good articulation. Ooh, taking it back.
So if you touch the gate at all?
Yeah.
That's a point?
10 points.
Oh, so you're better off to back up a little bit.
Yep. See if we can hug the gate. Nice. Good side hill. Easy climb. Stopped on that climb and the truck still pulled it. Final gate, this one should be tricky. I don't know if it'll do it. Woo-hoo-hoo.
Nice.